And well, hello everyone. Welcome to Friday Night Live. We're a few minutes late. I've got to tell you, folks, you are going to have one of the most excellent hours for the next 60 minutes. I want to introduce, hold on one second here, Rick. I got the...
I need to open up, turn off the light, turn on a light for my girlfriend. I'll be right back.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, there we go. Now I got the echo out. Well, hello, folks. How are you? My goodness, there's already 30 of you. I'm telling you, while Richard gets back here, folks, you are going to absolutely be, it's just amazing what's going to happen here. I mean, this guy is going to absolutely blow you away. Rick, how are you, my friend?
Thank you for having me. Stay tuned on that. I'm going bald. I'm unnatural process.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I want to give a little bit of your background. I gave a short little bio on the information part that everyone can see. But folks, you have got to appreciate a soul that has gone through this much experience, acquired this much knowledge, and then transformed that into wisdom. So Rick is based, you're in Oregon, right?
Yes.
And a physicist and a herbalist. He's the author of many diverse papers and books on metaphysics, parapsychology, and alternative agriculture. The alternative agriculture, folks, I've been reading some of his work. Anyway, let me continue. His recent books include Power Tools for the 21st Century, ESP, Induction Through Form of Self-Hypnosis, and he writes for a number of articles for Nexus magazine. Is that correct, Rick?
Yes.
And you sent me your writing that's going to be in the February edition, folks. Mind blown. So welcome again to my channel, Rick. The chat room is filling up rapidly here, and I don't want to take too much time away because what you and I were talking about prior to coming on live, and that's why we were a little bit late, we were talking about consciousness. And you were telling me from a physicist's point of view how any theory a physicist has only lasts about 20 years because of what we're learning. And I'm just going to turn it over to you to help carry that conversation.
There's never been any law in physics that's lasted longer than 20 years, other than maybe Maxwell's right-hand rule of thumb, relating electricity to magnetism, right-hand rule. Gravity, we are space, time, all of it is in flux right now. It used to be, we thought that the shortest distance between 2 points was a straight line. That sets up definitions and assumed truths that when you start to build your theorems and axioms and your theorems, okay, for what's going on in the universe, that changes. And I would say that it's a closed system with two brains. Cavitation is the process where a drop of water will fall, and when it falls, it hits a pool of water. There will be several things that happen. The first is that there'll be outer waves going outward. That's your future. Then the drop that hit the water will go down into the water slightly and pop back up again just before it pops in, moves up and down slowly into infinity. That is no longer a bubble. A drop of water. That becomes a bubble of exclusion zone water, or something that traps the medium in which it falls. And inside that will be air that is cavitating, going into the out of, almost down like a torus twister space. That was Roger Penrose, Princeton. And he was one of my mentors that suggested that everything is a dual situation. Our galaxy has a black hole in the center of it, and we're theorizing that there is a white hole at the other end of it. We say the same thing about our solar systems. All solar systems are binary. And so we have a twin, like what they call Nibiru. Our body has a binary system going on it with two brains and the new adult. It's like looking at an hourglass with the future and the past, and what you actually have is the moment. Okay. And what you're trying to do is take that from the profane into the sacred as a metaphor. You're trying to make that timeless, where lovemaking, somehow talking to somebody, you get so engrossed that all of a sudden it has nothing to do with time. Time is not, it's like, and it was Carl Sagan that did that in the movie Contact. The way Alley contacted the alien was to drop down into what we call a diamond body, face center cubic hexagonal closed fact structure, and go into a universe that was beyond time and space. And that universe is called the multiverse. And that's where consciousness, and the physics that's used today on that is called membrane physics, vessel functions with membranes going through each other and creating a fourth and fifth membrane as they do. And what they are, each one is a closed system, limited. And that's where man is at this point in his access to consciousness. Many Aborigines tribes do not consider consciousness to be real. They base their things on dream states, lucid dreaming to be explicit.
Right.
Lucid dreaming is when these two brains, religion and science, if you will, are in some kind of concert between each other, where you actually get to go home for a moment into what we call the multiverse. That is where consciousness resides. And Roger Penrose has further said recently that at the moment of death, there is a weight loss in the body. And it's consistent with everything anybody's ever mentioned. What is being lost? Well, he is proposing that it is a microtubule that contains structured water, the memory of who you were, who you are, and who you will be. Now, that is what the DNA is. The DNA can be seen as a three-dimensional hologram of force space. The brain is a four-dimensional hologram of five space. It's constantly changing. And so you have an amorphous semiconductor, if you want to look at it like that, that is constantly in flux or change. And that creates multiple universes.
Wow.
And that's a theory. That's a model. Now, that model probably won't last very long, just for trust with me, but it is an extension of the work I did from the early 70s on the holographic universe. And I wrote a paper. I've been nominated for a Nobel Prize on that. We'll see what happens. I'm part of the Russian.
Pull it for you.
Well, because what they call, I'm a writer. That means I was the first to come up with the idea for the military. The reason I'm not in Talbot's book is that at that moment that Talbot wrote about that, all my work was classified top secret. John Bohm was on the right track with his implicate order, talking about the hidden variable of similar differences and different similarities. And Gregory Bateson is the one that talks about metaphor. What is your metaphor? But to serve your paradox. And that, making a leap, going from an analog place to digital. And man, like your eyes, they can only see certain things, and they break it down into digital. The problem with a quantum universe model is that the more you know about one thing, the less you know about the other. It's an indeterminacy with Heisenberg. And so the concept of fractals came into being. Mandelbrot.
Right. That was in the 80s, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did my theory in the 70s when I met Gabor at the experimental station in Wilmington. I walked by this lab and I looked in there, and there's a three-dimensional color TV actually operational in 1967. Now, at that moment, at that time, he was taking two-dimensional holograms and creating a third dimension. It's a way information collapses down into itself or expands out of itself like a fractal, generator. And so information isn't what we think it is exactly. because there's a theorem that states that if you have enough information to ask a coherent question, you have enough information to answer it.
Is information consciousness?
No, information is a point of consciousness, but it is not consciousness itself.
Wow.
Okay, and your soul, we don't know what the soul is, but from a physics point of view, we can say its physical analog is microtubules in structured water inside a microtubule, and that's the surface of your skin. As what is responsible for studies we've done in acupuncture, which is what we were doing for Nixon at that time. We were trying to understand what acupuncture was, and we came up with the word chi. And chi is a part of the whole package at some dimensional level. And so we have now determined that we go back to home in our dreams at night, certain forms of astral projection, certain forms of soul projection, where meditation, you shabad, sound current, you leave your body and you go to Sachkhand or whatever Hindu term they might use. This is described in the Upanishads. And so what we're trying to do, not reverse engineer technologies as much as have a model that allows certain doors to open and give us access to certain things. The very fact that we now know that space is curved, with the right mathematics, I can prove the Earth's flat. It's not, but those assumptions, what they do is they set up what you can and can't do with that model.
Interesting. People want to know, what is structured water?
Structured water is H3O2. It is
H3O2.
Yes, it's not hydrogen peroxide, which is H2O2, and it's not deuterium, which is an isotope, or tritium, and it's not para or ortho water, which is levorotary. It is H3O2. When that drop of water hits the pool, what happens is whenever water touches anything, it immediately restructures it. And each element is different. That means that if it's touching plastic, there's no surface tension. If it touches tellurium, that water will climb right up that wall all the way up to fall over to the other side, because the structure is demanding for that tellurium. Each element is different, and water then, when it touches air, for example, it becomes H3O2, and you'll notice it is what's the leading edge on a wave and why surfing is possible. It's why capillary action is possible. We never had the model on how it worked until we discovered H3O2 using optical devices. You can actually see there's a structural difference in the way it works with light, absorption bands and things like that.
Well, taking your example of the drop of water as it begins to hit the surface on that, I read recently is that it actually forms its own universe.
That's correct. Yes, it's a closed system though.
Right.
Whip, and up it comes. Whip, 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 whip.
And isn't it like millions of vibrations that we are not even aware of yet? That's
okay. It's 1 million times more than gallium arsenide forming the forbidden zone. When you take two solid state physics chips of metal and put them together to form what we call a computer chip, that forms a boundary layer between the two, which is called the forbidden zone. And that's where all your information is stored. And water is 1 million times, 6 zeros more efficient, which means it can hold all of your lives.
Wow.
And that's the structure of water, and why water now is this century's most important discovery is the fact that it explains things like capillary action and how your blood is pumped through your veins, that goes through your veins and things like that. It's this surface tension aspect. Yeah. Now, Rustum Roy has done, that was Jerry Pollack's work, the University of Washington, and I worked under him in 1970. Rustum Roy at Penn State will take what we call bulk water, and by just dropping a single element of anything in, baking soda is what I use with Navy SEALs, it will cause the restructure of the entire body of water. And, and when it does that, billions of universes are formed. Billions. And that's what we're up against now. The concept of what a multiverse is over string theory. Current mathematics and that is now using what we call knot theory, Boy Scout knots that are plasmas, so they don't interface with each other. And the way it distorts space-time with a bowline over a slip knot, over a different kind of knots. And the math that's used on that today is Kaufman. Kaufman has knot theory. That particular form is the one they use now with fractals and Mandelbrot Julian math. Okay, that's where we are at this moment. And the application is stuff like Emoto, that where you can take your structure of thought, place it into matter. That means imagination is reality. That means you can change the movie. That means that consciousness has options, and why we became God's favorite. We have choice.
Now, boy, because now you're hitting into
I know.
it's like, okay, now we got to talk about this.
If you ever get even half of what I'm saying, you're doing very well.
You're blowing away the chat room. They're just absolutely loving this. So I want to talk about the fact that, all right, I am a big fan of Dr. Robert Lanza and his book of biocentrism.
I quote him in my article. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I said, you know what, you've just got yourself your best friend. That's me, because what I learned about time, he as he breaks down the whole construct of time and dealing with the multiverse, that as that water hits, because I know what people are thinking. They said, well, yeah, but when the water hits, it's only a half a second that's going to take it to hit it. How can that be a multiverse and last more than a quarter of a second? But I don't think we understand time, right?
That's correct. Time is not what we think it is. Historically, it is a duration of consciousness. It is the way you store memory in a closed system or cavitation process.
Wow. So it's like he said, time is looking for, and I have it written up here, time is a concept looking for a function.
There you go. St. Augustine, Plato, all of them. The duration of consciousness is the way you respond to memory. And what time travel, for example, would be for you to go back into memory, you have to reconstruct the brain's hologram at that moment that it was stored. And when you do that, up comes the memory. And it's confabulated.
Okay, because now we got to talk about your paper on the holographic universe. Okay. And I just read some experts of it. And folks, I got to tell you, by the way, there's it's over 186 people now listening in the chat room talking. So it's growing very quickly here. Talk to us about the holographic concept of reality.
That was a paper I wrote in 1972. 1973, I went to Prague to present that at the International Congress, first symposium on psychotronics. My mentor, Sir Stanley Krippner, Dr. Stanley Krippner, was the one that had introduced me to Edgar Mitchell in 1970, so that I was at mission control in 71 to do the ESP studies. That's what I did. I was in the center of it all as lead physicist. And I later, that was SEAL Corporation, when I developed and constructed SEAL Team 1 and then trained SEAL Teams 2 and 3. And their protocol was extrasensory perception. I wanted individuals that thought with their gut.
Okay, let's stop. So this is mind-blowing. The military, special ops. I mean,
well, I don't know. That was Field Corp out of Amherst before it was Navy.
Well, but yeah. ESP, they were focusing in on. Can you go a little bit more into that?
It's thinking with your gut. You are not human. You're basically a habitat. If you looked at your physics of the body, less than 10% of it is human, and the rest of it are viruses, mold, yeasts, and smaller organisms, viruses, bacteria, etc. It's a hierarchy or aggregate like you would find in the soil. In the soil today, we call that mycorrhizae. The mycorrhizae is a habitat with mycelium and bacteria and all. It's a hierarchy. And why I would now say you are no longer what you eat, you are whom you feed. And actually, that is a correct way of looking at it. You can smell when you're eating too much sugar, the candida takes over. You can smell it in your armpits and whatever. You're setting up habitats that are actually literally outside space-time. And every single human being is uniquely different than another. And why certain foods are, you're attracted to certain foods and not others because of the demand of the hierarchy or, mycelium, whatever is going on in your body. I am only just now beginning to grasp the full implications of it, but literally most saints through history have stressed the importance of meditation, training the mind.
Right.
Persinger's studies in brain pattern, that's different between a 30-year meditator. I was able to take my SEALs to that place in less than 2 years using brain drivers. And you don't learn it as well. And like all shortcuts to grandma's house, there are big bad wolves, like drugs. Drugs are the new direction in physics, where we're interested now in this multiverse that we're constantly going in and out of, where you can do things in certain mind states that you cannot do where you are in conscious state right now. One of which is ripping a car door off an automobile in a flaming car situation where you're trying to rescue your daughter. And that happened. But how can you do that? The bone in your body isn't as strong as steel. So
Correct.
How is that possible? Because an ant, for example, can lift 10 times its weight. It has to do with the state of consciousness and where you're hanging out. And ESP has already been shown. It's just slightly over here to the left. If you go into this light state of hypnosis, your ability in guessing is 400 times over where you are right now. That's what led us. That's the ESP studies that came out of, and why I wrote that book. That was the protocol. The ESP book was how I chose who was going to be a Navy SEAL. We all can do this, but what we are doing is basically closing down certain. You see, your eyes are not receptors; they're filters of reality, and you select those things where you see certain things, and you discard others. That determines which state of your universe you're in, and you can change that.
So we've got 7 billion different multiverses taking place at the same time.
I think it's more than that. Yes.
Yeah. Now
that is correct.
So the purpose then for the military on the ESP was to create a super soldier, right?
Well, they didn't call him that back then. Yes, that's correct. And they wanted someone that was okay. For example, there's a technique I learned in Tai Chi after I had martial arts that allowed me to slow my perception of time down without losing my precision in Tai Chi. And that place allowed the military soldiers to be able to box paranormally, to have the precision of everything slowing down, and yet you were doing Hung Gao.
That's spatial distortion.
That's correct. And it's done with consciousness and a technique with breathing. You started with straws, you graduated to didgeridoos, and at the end of the day, you were playing Indian flutes like Kill Bill.
All because of the mind.
I'm just kidding.
No, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, let's then talk about the studies then that you went into in the late 60s, particularly where psilocybin mushrooms are concerned. And
psilocybin mushrooms.
Now, I got a little experience on this side, but I don't have it from the physicist side.
All right. So in 1964, before LSD was actually illegal, that was Andrew Weil, by the way, just the little toad. Timothy Leary and the school at Harvard decided they wanted to find out what would happen if they gave LSD to someone gifted, genius. What would happen to that person? And I was selected as one of, I think there were 12 or 15 participants around the country. Jack Sarfati, others came to mind. I don't remember who else was on that. I was 20 years old at the time. Timothy Leary came out to visit my mother, And then he came out to visit my professor that I was leading. He was my professor at Washington State University. And we'd never heard of LSD at that time, of course. It was 1964, not 74 now. Yeah, exactly. And here I am up at Deception Pass, Hurricane Ridge in Seattle, Washington, looking 2,000 feet down into the Puget Sound, and it's boiling back colors and peeling. It's a crazy thing. And Leary leaned over and he said, "Wouldn't it be neat to jump?" And what happened next?
Oh no!
Yeah. What happened next is that I discovered Aldous Huxley's Doors of Perception, and from that moment on, all of my studies were built around the concept of altered states of consciousness and their possible use as tools in a toolbox.
Was that Dr. Leary's primary purpose of what he was looking at? I know Carl Sagan participated in some of that as well. Was that the purpose, though, of really opening up those channels, as you said, of the mind?
What it did for me is it jump-started my body's own production of lysergic acid amide as a neurotransmitter. And you'll notice that Power Tools is outlined in 8 chapters using neurotransmitters and the I Ching. That is going to be my codex in all the books I write now. And every single book will have that thing, much like Aleister Crowley had Liber in all of his books. All of his different books were numbered in terms of which one goes where. Now, I'm not sure yet what I'm doing other than suggesting that in the 22nd century, magic will be advanced physics with a mystery school, somewhat like the way Frank Herbert portrayed it in Dune, where you have the Bene Gesserit and you have the Mentats over here, and you have the different ways of looking at reality or schools of thought that allow certain kinds of doors to be opened and other ones to be closed. And you use that. Did I lose you? Your picture has frozen. I can't hear you. What has happened? Are we here? I'm not getting anything. Did you lose me? I'm going to close and try to reboot back into the session here. Okay? I'm not getting anything. So I'm going to leave the meeting.
Well, I wasn't sure what's going on there. Boy, we just took a hit, and that was not normal. Holy cow, folks. I am hoping that Richard will come back on. So, wow. So much for Comcast, huh? Hello, Xfinity. Well, let's just hope here he comes back on, folks. So give me 1 second here and we'll get him connected right back on to us. Let's see. Hold on. Hold on, Rick. I'm getting to you. There we go. Here he is. Well, I guess the, hold on 1 second there. Can we get you unmuted there? Okay, there we go. Well, I guess the powers to be weren't liking that conversation.
I don't know that that's a way to look at it. That's the glass half empty. I'm going to choose it as half full, and Comcast just simply. By the way, Comcast is a military network. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Yeah.
Well, there it is. In any case, I discovered the possible uses of altered states of consciousness, and that's where we started selecting our so-called super soldiers.
And then that led into the biofeedback and the brainwashing, right?
Well,
or brainwave, I guess is really okay. That was my Freudian slip.
I bet it was frogman.
You're right.
Frogman slips. That toad. That's what from toad licking. You better be careful out there.
Yeah.
What LSD is a toxin, and when it enters the body freaks out. It releases its own similar neurotransmitter, which is lysergic acid amide. And the LSD is broken down into salts and in the urine within 20 minutes of ingestion. And the 20 hours of psychoactive activity is from your own brain's response.
Really?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
mushrooms are the same. You know, psilocin, psilocybin psilocin and psilocybin are similar. They're different alkaloids.
They are.
There are 8 that I identified as important. And what I've been doing now is, rather than taking drugs, I'm trying to do the chill of my body. That's dimethyltryptamine, without having to take a foreign drug to cause my body. What taking acid once or twice does is jumpstart your brain's own production. And now once you've done that, then it's a series of exercises and other things to fine tune it and train the mind like the saints in history would define. The thing is, and I was going to talk about Persinger, was that his direction showed bliss states, what they call cosmic consciousness. You know,
Okay.
a meditator has a very specific type of brain pattern that is quite different than that of a normal human being that does not meditate. And I was older already. It takes 30 years to get there. And so how do you jumpstart that? How do you get there quicker, like you take drugs? Well, that is with brain drivers, you know, frequency following Monroe's work, and out of Berkeley. And I have used all of these tools to enhance my abilities to the point where I'm basically a polymath. And that means I'm a world authority in a number of different fields, unrelated to each other. But at some point, I will find the way of making them the same, somewhat like Rudolf Steiner did. My great-grandfather was his lodge master, by the way. So I'm a legacy, and one of the reasons I went into agriculture in the first place. I know people, that's another thing people didn't know about. Yeah, I know. I'm just, well, I've been bred for this moment. And the military, old man DuPont was there at my graduation, ready to offer me a job when I came out of undergraduate school. Then when I came out of grad school, Seal Corporation, and then MRU were there waiting for me. I've been a prodigy for the military for, you know, half a century. There are several of us that are like this. And what I am is not special. I am what you can become in this lifetime if you so choose to, you know, do the effort of it. We, all of us, we're not special. We're just the length, girth, and width of what constitutes humanity.
Yep.
You know, they're showing that the orca has a cerebral cortex that's twice the size of man, and that particular mammal is firing 60% of it, not 10 like we are. Now that means that's God by definition, not our God.
60%
of their cerebral cortex at any given moment. Yes, sir. That means that mammal is going to universes we can't even comprehend.
Holy crap.
And but here's the bad news. The dolphin are right behind that, and it's about food chain, because I've watched orca chase dolphin for food.
Well, survival will override consciousness anytime.
Well, no, there are those are called neurologic circuits. That's
Okay.
Timothy again, and there's 8 of them. Neurologic circuits, okay?
Right.
That's why my book is Organ, and what you're trying to do is put survival in the proper context of where it belongs. Okay, in meditation, they say to get rid of ego. No, you don't want to get rid of ego. You want to bring it down into a point over here in its place among all the rest of it, and what we define as consciousness. And those things are what we call algorithms, the way we would group different aspects of what consciousness is. It's something much more than that, and will be never definable. In fact, I have in my studies realized that there are some things that are not knowable at any century. And these are what are discussed in the Kabbalah, and why I became a Hermetic Kabbalist looking for answers.
Right.
You won't find them in physics. Where would you go? Religion? Well, that's what magic is about. It's called the sleight of mind. Legerdemain is sleight of hand. Magic would be sleight of mind, where you use an altered state to lift something you can't normally lift. You would use this conscious state over here so that you knew what was about to happen, ESP, etc. And once you have that, that's the next stage in the evolution of man.
You're the second person today that I've heard that the new reality that we're going to come to is magic. So that's what we're going to, it's the next it can only be the next step.
Because you don't, like God, you define God as that which cannot be known. What you can do is experience it, but you can't know it. You only know a portion of it by through the experience. And by heightening to your level, self-realization, Maslow, that only is halfway to God. And, you know, self-realization and then God realization. And the two outer paths, if you look at the tree of life, to approach God is either as the hermit or the lovers. That's the right and left side of the path. Middle pillar, you're going in as high priestess. And in the center above Christ consciousness or what we call Tippereth is Dath, D-A-A-T-H, which is knowledge through wisdom. And it's a temporary place. It's not real. That's why Castaneda said all knowledge is tonal, and the, you know.
Wait a minute, let's go back. Okay, I want to make sure I just heard it, because that just it clicked with me. It's not real. It's a place, but it's not real.
That's right. We're playing follow the leader. I come run down a hill, you run down a hill. I come to a roaring river, and without hesitation, like the Joker, I will leap out into the center of the water, touch on a rock that's under the water that you didn't see, and leap over to the other side laughing. That is what Dath is. A temporary, momentary place.
I just got that, Rick. I mean, the middle image just bung. All right, so let's take that then into the context of the holographic universe. What I can only deduct from that, if you take that theory, is that it's been here all the time. We just haven't been aware of it.
That's why they call Hopi, others would say that consciousness is not real. What's real is specific dream states that have more content of reality. And that's one of the reasons why everybody should be today monitoring their dreams.
Are we going to just wake up, Rick, when we die? When that synaptic pathway starts firing, are we going to just simply, like Rod Sterling said, are we going to wake up and go, what a dream?
That's one metaphor that has been used. Heaven and hell. If you go to the Bordeaux Thadal, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which, by the way, just for you UFO buffs, that artifact on the other side of the moon is Buddhist. And in case you're interested.
Did y'all just hear that? Did you just? And by the way, there's 230 in the chat room right now, Rick. There's 230 and growing. So,
well, the thing is, the Buddhists had spaceflight in a previous epoch, and their Tibetan Book of the Dead is a how to get off the wheel. The idea that at the very moment of death, this is Zen Gardner, someone I respect, even though he was dissed because of being, he is actually a better writer than me, in my opinion, and I really respect this man. Don is bright, and he said in the last decision you have to make is at the moment of death, when you're offered a choice between a tunnel of light with all your friends and your doggy waiting for you there, or the blue light.
The blue light.
That's correct. That's in the Bordeaux Thadal. That is a road. That's Dath. That's that temporary place where you make a decision whether you're going to come back here for a moment or you move on to the next stage of evolution. And that is Buddhist. That's a Tibetan Buddhist form. I spent 2 weeks in the jungles with Ibn Alexander. I have studied with Kubler-Ross and James Hillman. Hillman is what gave me my background in Jungian psychotherapy. And I'm a bunch of things. I'm an anesthesiologist. I'm a physicist. I've got a bunch of credentials. And I can tell you that all that does for me is give me a better quality of life. It hasn't made me richer. It's not about money. Education is about quality of life, your relationship to yourself, and moral codes of ethics, rules of conduct. And everybody's different. That's what distinguishes one from another, and why Ducky Mallard said, an ethical man knows not to cheat on his wife, a moral man won't. That's the difference between ethics and morals.
I love that. I'm reading here as you were talking. So belief
I know we're going
system.
to have to do more shows.
I know. 'Cause, I mean, folks, I got them for an hour and we got 20 minutes left, and I know the chat room is just going off the scale here, but let me help me with the thing that, okay, we're discovering these keys. I'll just use the metaphor that they're keys, each one unlocking another level of understanding. I see the anchor pulling back down, though, are the individual belief systems of the individual.
So the fact that you were born in the United States predisposes you to be Christian. If you had been born in Afghanistan, you would not be a Christian.
I'd be Muslim.
Now, that said, that would suggest that beliefs are arbitrary and possibly used as a tool.
Whoa.
And so, like all tools, wearing a sweater during the summer is not appropriate. That sweater gets folded neatly and put in a drawer to be pulled out later when it's chilly. That's what a belief system is used for. It's to solve, or it's a way of approaching your shop, if you will, of tools. And some people do woodworking, others do metal work, sculpting, whatever. And you have a bunch of tools in your toolbox. What you're trying to do, if you were a Christian and two aliens walked in the door, would you be able to see them?
I would say that
if I hadn't believed it.
Yeah.
It filters our beliefs filter our senses, and that's how you change your senses so that you can see that which cannot. That's how the shaman in What the Bleep was able to see the ship out in the ocean, whereas the tribe itself was unable to see it because they had no concept.
Well, that then would indicate why some move higher and some can't.
That's one possible metaphor.
Okay.
Who knows?
Yeah.
It's opening doors to us now that are limitless. And the fact that the brain is a three-dimensional hologram of four space, a four-dimensional hologram of five space, would suggest that you can go to this part of the brain, the reticular activating center. We'll call it the Wernicke correction. If you go to the Wernicke correction near the RAS, you will find that every single one of humans on Earth today will all have a memory of having worked on Mars for the US government. How does that work? That's a study called the Mars Project and Wernicke correction. You see, archetypally, it's in metaphor again, and the Wernicke correction is a place in the brain that has memory of working on Mars, living on Mars. Mars is our original source of humans, and right now we've been displaced, and your so-called Anunnaki or whatever they are that are coming to collect the rent. That's a metaphor. If you want to, that's where all the gold went.
I think it's really accurate.
The thing is, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. The Hopi talk about the red and blue cucina. There are 5,000 years of medicine. Medicine is where you sing, or it's an oral tradition of passing your history, like Enemy Mine movie. Yeah. The Hopi talk about the Clovis and how they climbed out of a cave after their epoch. Now, the red and blue cucina would suggest a redshift situation where something is going to go through our solar system so quickly we have no warning. It just boom happens.
Now, from a physicist's point of view, that's very possible, right?
That's what do you think's happening right now? How did Stanford do out there when they said, "Hey, where did that planet come up there by Saturn?" They have acknowledged there's a planet out there by Saturn right now. Where did it come from? It came in from the Oort cloud. It belongs to Nibiru. It's part of a secondary solar system. Someone else at Stanford said, yes, but the IR signature of Nibiru is wrong. And that's when JPL said, yeah, it's almost like there's a Dyson sphere around it, where our future is coming into the moment. It's all in metaphor.
Yeah.
This place is not real. And I'm trying to use it in words that individuals with no technical background might be able to grok it. Yes, stranger in a strange land. That's correct. That started the neo-pagan movements. That's Church of All Worlds. which I write for Green Egg. I've been doing this for a very long time, and no, I don't know. You can't know it. It's experiencing it. It's a different way of being, and that is what distinguishes us from the Aborigine, and with our so-called technologies, our taphasia, trial by fire. That's what this epoch is about. And I can tell you that we've been here before. We're now down in south of Mexico unearthing facilities that are way more complicated and extensive than New York City. And just a couple of days ago, they discovered something off of Mindanao, up in the not the Marshalls, the Palau. That's Micronesia. Advanced civilizations. And the Hopi talk about it. You want to go to even older cultures, and that would be the Koryak and Inuit, the Eskimos, and their legends go back 7,000 years. And by the way, that accounts for the weather changes, because they said that the stars have changed. That means the pole shift has occurred.
Yeah, that was my next question, because I believe that we are in the midst of that pole shift as we speak.
That's Bert Bolin, University of Stockholm, Sweden. He was a Nobel Prize winner. I am been studying this for the military for a long time, and I'm frankly here to tell you, I don't know. I have theories, and they will last so many centuries or whatever. They won't last very long, but it helps. They're models for how I can determine to predict what is going to happen next, type of thing. And the problem is, what are the variables? And that's always been the case. One study, this is an interesting study. In Seattle, where I grew up, there is the Aquarian Foundation. And at that time I was a boy, they had a medium there called Keith Milton Reinhardt. Same time, Jack Schwartz. Those were both people I studied at the Menninger Foundation. And Keith Milton Reinhardt visited one of my classes I was teaching at the UW, and he did a billet reading. A billet reading is where you write something on a piece of paper, put it in your pocket, and the medium then answers the question.
Oh,
okay. That's how they do that. And I put in my pocket, how can I be told that you're not just reading my mind? And his response to me, he had 102 students. He nailed 100 of us out of 102. There were only two that were okay. And he said, in my father's bedroom, there's a hope chest at the edge of the bed, and at the very bottom of it is a letter that was written before you were born. And there it was. And that was Keith Milton Reinhardt, and why Helmut Schmidt at Boeing and others did studies on him, because he was the real deal. Jack Schwartz could stick needles through his arm and stop the bleeding. If you don't think the military didn't want to know how that worked. Oh. Well, I mean,
are we seeing a contamination of the timeline? I mean, listen, because if you could do predictive answers before an event, someone's manipulating the timelines, and that's.
In fact, I deal with that in the paper that I sent to you on the mandala.
Yep. I know. I got it written down here. Folks, I'm going to hope we can get this in the next 10 to 20 minutes, because, all right, go on. Let's go on.
Well, I think we only have 10 minutes. Yeah. But that's why you want to have me back.
Yes, absolutely.
What we're doing is a little dance right now, so that I hooked you into the idea of the possibilities of what an altered state is and is not, and why we're going to want to study them. The mushrooms you took caused your brain to start producing its own neurotransmitter. Now your chore is to learn how to manipulate that for yourself, so that it does what you want it to do, rather than just indiscriminately have a chill going up and down your spine. By the way, that's Gopai Krishna and Sri Aurobindo that did those studies. And I was very fortunate to meet several of these things over in Indralaya on Orcas Island, one of the Theosophical Camp studies. And as a physicist, trying to understand what altered states might actually imply. They're gifts from God. And what I'm trying to do is map them as an ontology, like, so that you have access to a roadmap and can use them appropriately for your next phase in evolving.
Yeah, because I'd like to talk to you a little bit more. You know, I've had one doctor approach me when he found out that the amount of LSD I took at the age I did. He said, it's remarkable, he said, that you, and he went on to say how I process things. He said, it's not a normal brain.
Well, you
And
have
I went, what's
dendrites, and then
normal?
you have subcategories of dendrites. That's what has made my brain slightly different. I
Yeah,
have
exactly.
categories of dendrites. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, it is a development that why I'm so attracted to children is that they're brighter than we are. And that's my gift. I have an eidetic memory, which was a direct result of what happened with that LSD, where I am basically a 4-year-old that has never become 7. And
Oh, I get that.
that's why Cloud Atlas and mentorship is one of the things I am. And really, what adults are is facilitators.
Wow.
Let the
Everyone,
children.
did y'all hear that? Listen, folks, seriously. All right. There's almost 250 people in here. The numbers are going up as our time is shrinking.
I would love to answer questions. I do best on that because I'm a polymath. I can do almost anything that you're, and it isn't that I'm reading it. I formally studied. I actually did the work. Well, no, I don't know, and no, that I don't know.
The Mandela effect, real quick. Someone wants to know, what can we do? Your point of view on the Mandela effect in memory, because
it is, yeah, that's a good way to approach it. It is a confabulation of misthoughts where a comic book on Star Wars misquoted the movie, and people are not sure which was which. That's how it works. We've had comic books and we've had cartoons on Star Wars, and depending on whether you're a millennium, baby boomer, or it changes with each century or millennium. And I'm here to tell you that the timelines are not arbitrary, because this is a dream state.
Wow. A lucid dream state?
No, this is not even that close. It's less than that.
Which
Lucid
ties it
closer to reality than consciousness is. Yes, sir.
Wow. You see, right before, what y'all don't know, before we went live almost an hour ago, I asked Rick, I said, well, we were talking about when you die, how the synaptic pathways begin to break down on a cellular level. And I said, well, Rick, is consciousness confined to a cell, or is it consciousness basically the amalgamation of many cells? And that's why
multiverse. That's what led us to this point.
A multiverse. And you see how this conversation has just been, but I do want to bring out one point on how they're doing this. So apparently now in Forrest Gump, I remember the movie that life is a box of chocolates,
You never know what you're going to get.
Exactly. Well, apparently it's now life was a box of chocolate.
Well,
I ain't falling for it.
Yeah, that's the coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Exactly. And it just becomes even more. So I want to get into one other point. Listen, folks.
You're stuttering.
Well, it comes in here. One of your quotes in here is that you said, because human memories are not completely reliable.
No, they're not. They confabulate. They cross over, because you do not reproduce that hologram precisely the way it was originally when the information was.
So, Rick, is that why I was telling my wife this last night, because I was studying for this. I am a fan of your work now. And I said, isn't it odd how we look back in the past and how we relive things, but we're seeing it from the outside. We're looking at ourselves.
Right. That's right.
Well,
that's the cavitation part of into the out of.
Yeah, that's my point. It's so odd how you can begin to see the spatial part of time, how it, anyway. Yeah. All right, one last thing, because I got 4 minutes.
And by the way, it's different for children than it is for adults. Are we there yet?
You rascal. You're all right. So then that would get into where we get into this thing of timelines and choices. You see, folks, this man is brilliant. That's all I got to say is just a brilliant mind. Way to go. So timelines, can they be altered? Can they be changed? Or is it the individual who is actually impacting their own timeline?
You see, when you have coincidences and synchronicity, where you have 6 things in front of you, and one of them leaps out as important, and the others are not important. I want to know about that. That is your future timeline and how it is talking to the moment. And if you can integrate that, where you actually follow that instinct, it changes your past. And the cavitation process has evolved.
Can a person find the place of dwelling in the constant moment?
What do you mean, we, white man?
No, I'm just saying.
You got to go back to Johnny Depp, man.
Yeah, I know. I remember.
Well, no, I mean, what we're talking about is if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Interesting. There you go, folks. There you go.
If I can do it, I'm just the lead scout. I'm doing this. Other people are doing that. My purpose right now is to show some footprints that can be duplicated and followed.
Well, I'm convinced that if people would follow you, their lives would drastically improve. People are wanting to know what do you see for the future?
It sounds to me like another show.
Yeah, it is another show. Let me just do a shameless plug for Rick on this end. Yeah. Wait a minute, don't go anywhere, because listen, you have a GoFundMe account, because here's the thing, folks. Science is not a path to wealth and fortune. It's a sacrifice like many other creative arts are. And science is a discipline, Rick. And listen, I'm going to plug you. And I think we should go over there. If you can, go over there to GoFundMe. Go to his GoFundMe account. It's richardalanmiller.com as well. Let's continue to be able to fund this man's work. I think, Rick, I want you to come back. You want to say something? Go ahead. I can see it.
No, it's okay. I would rather you buy my books than give me money. I would rather you read my books and integrate them into your personal life. I did that with Navy, and that was what made Navy SEAL the myth that it is today.
Okay. All right. So
original intent. Now, actually, what I'm doing now is purpose. They're slightly different. Intent is what happens at the end of the day. Purpose is why you're here.
Ooh, that's good. All right. Buy his books, folks. Let's get this man. Rick, I want you back. Please come back. It has just been, it shows you that time is relative in perception, because I feel like we've only been here for 10 minutes.
That's where it goes into the sacred. That's what you're all now seeking out of life.
Yeah. Yeah. Folks, I can't say enough. Everyone, listen, there's still 240 plus people in here, Rick. They want you to come back. We will have you back, and I will be sending you an email because I want to follow up with you on a couple of things.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And actually, you're pretty knowledgeable for this topic here. I'm impressed. Most people don't even get half of what I say this way.
Well, thank you, sir.
And I'm into sustainable lifeboats, working for what is about to happen so that there is a chance of men surviving.
By the way, I've read that, and we're going to get you funded on this one. This one is something that humanity needs, and it's something. I'll just let you know before I go, Rick, just let you know on this channel here, I have a list that I'll be doing on Monday's show. I support everyone who has a business out there, and I tell them, send me your business and I will promote your business, because we are a community. I just want to say welcome to the community, Rick.
Thank you. Thank you. It'd be my pleasure to be a participant.
Okay, my friend. I won't hold you anymore. Everyone, thank you. Blessings to everyone. Be safe, and we will see you again real soon. Bye-bye, everyone.